Welcome to another video here at Back to Classics. And today we're going to discuss something very, very different. This Magni Moto Guzzi 1000 Bol Special. So yeah, we're now into a big question mark in this project, because next up is of course choosing a color or color scheme, in fact. What do you think this bike should be? Red, of course, that's very obvious. A little touch of white, maybe another color. Maybe purple? Let us know in the comments, because we're very keen to hear what you guys have to say about it. So today we're going to discuss big names in the Italian motorcycle industry. Magni and Moto Guzzi, and how these two created among the greatest motorcycles in history. So let's start with Moto Guzzi, a little bit of historic background there. Moto Guzzi is Italy's oldest continuous motorcycle manufacturer, founded in 1921 in Mandello del Lario on the shores of Lake Como. And Moto Guzzi produced lightweight singles, mostly, that were successful in European racing, and became the first motorcycle manufacturer to also build a dedicated wind tunnel. And they explored radical engineering concepts, and that included even a V8 Grand Prix racer. So by the 1960s, the world market for motorcycles was changing toward higher capacity motorcycles, mostly for recreational use instead of just a means of transportation as it was before that era. And government tenders also for police and military motorcycles, they were emerging, which is why Moto Guzzi's leadership realized that the market change demanded a new engine platform. That is when lead engineer, that was Giulio Cesare Cersano, he was asked with designing a brand new engine platform that could be used to power that future of the company. And he came up with a 90-degree V-twin, mounted with the crankshaft longitudinally, that is going from front to back, instead of what was usually the case with the crankshaft mounted sideways in the engine. And that meant the layout was ideal for fitting a drive shaft, as we see here as well. And that drive shaft was proved to be very useful, especially in military and police use, because it demanded much less maintenance compared to a conventional chain. So that is why he chose this layout. It also meant easy cooling with these cylinder heads poking out of the engine on the side, something that is similar seen on a BMW, of course, with its boxer twin. And this new layout became very iconic for Moto Guzzi as a brand, as we all remember these particular bikes from the 1960s, 70s, but to this very day, it became the way Moto Guzzi is known, like the L-twin of Ducati, the boxer twin of BMW, etc. So the first production motorcycle to use that new engine platform was the V7 Special of 1967. 703cc, it produced modest power by today's standards, roughly 50 horsepower, but it delivered very good torque and good durability, which was required by police forces around the world. Bore and stroke changes, of course, camshaft profiles, carburetor updates, and it all allowed for Moto Guzzi to scale that engine up as we went along. And famous engineer Lino Tonti, he redesigned the engine for the now infamous 1971 Moto Guzzi V7 Sport. A beautiful motorcycle and sort of the start of the sporting range of motorcycles based on that new engine platform by Moto Guzzi. Now that platform grew even further, and in 1976 that was introduced the new model, the 850 Le Mans, also one of the most iconic of the Moto Guzzi range, a cafe racer style sports bike that combined the V-twin charismatic torque with sharp handling and endurance racing aesthetics. And this longitudinal V-twin became Moto Guzzi's signature. Like I said, it was much like we today regard that L-twin from Ducati, the boxer twin of BMW, the Japanese inline four, of course, all iconic engines. It powered cruisers, it powered police bikes, sporting models for decades, to this very day, in fact. Moto Guzzi, they retained that basic architecture, the air-cooled 2-valve heads, later also in 4-valve version. The shaft drive, it all became part of what is known as a Moto Guzzi right now. That about Moto Guzzi, now about Magni, and therefore we have to start with Arturo Magni. He was born in 1925, and at a young age he already had an eye for engineering, interesting mostly into aviation, and he won the 1938 Italian gliding championship with a glider he designed himself, so that proves his engineering background at a young age already. Now, in 1947, he joined Gilera, where they had a racing department headed by the designer Piero Remor. They had this wonderful four-cylinder racing Grand Prix bike and was very successful there. But when Remor moved to MV Agusta in 1950, Magni followed as well. At MV Agusta, he moved from mechanic to direttore sportivo, overseeing the fabled Reparto Corse racing division, and under his direction MV Agusta dominated Grand Prix racing for many years with a staggering 75 world titles, 37 for manufacturer and 38 for riders. Between the 500cc triples and four-cylinder bikes, he managed successes with riders as Giacomo Agostini, Mike Halewood, John Surtees and Phil Reed. They all raced under his technical stewardship, and he shaped the mechanical marvels back in the 1950s, 60s and 70s. Until 1976, that is, because that is when MV Agusta withdrew from racing altogether, ending that era. So he was out of a job, but rather than going into retirement, he decided to set up his own shop, and that is how in 1977 he established Elaborazione Magni near Milan, operating alongside his two sons, Carlo and Giovanni. And this workshop started in Semerate, just minutes from MV Agusta's former base, and they began by crafting precision parts and modifications for MV Agusta street bikes, specializing in chain drive conversions, big bore kits and tuned frames for bikes, the 750, the Sport of course, the 750 America that followed later. And they also launched EPM, that stands for Elaborazione Preparazioni Magni, and it was a subsidiary dedicated to high quality cast alloy wheels, and it was mostly done under Carlo's leadership. Of course, you have to bear in mind that back in those days, Borani wire wheels, they were outdated, and casted wheels, they were the way of the future. The early focus of Magni was very simple. They enhanced the handling and aesthetics of the MV Agusta street bikes, of which there was much room to play with, because in basis they were very good racing bikes, but that drive shaft that they came with proved to be problematic when they were actually used for racing. So that is why these parts, these kits that were available from Magni, they were very popular for MV Agusta owners to convert their bikes into what actually should have been made by MV Agusta in the first place. So by the early 1980s, Magni expanded into broader territory because the MV Agusta market was only very small, with a very limited amount of motorcycles made by that company. They first went with Honda, building a MH1, which was a naked version, and the MH2, which was fully faired, all around the Honda CB900F ball-door engine. It delivered about 120 horsepower, far from the 95 that they originally had, and approximately 260 of these bikes were built. Soon after, Magni also created frames for BMW engines, the MB1 and the MB2, all built around the BMW R100 Boxer 1000cc engine, for which Magni designed a specific frame and other cycle components. Now, over time, around 1,000 motorcycles were built, including Honda engines, Suzuki, and most famously Moto Guzzi. Because by 1985, that partnership with Moto Guzzi became deeper and deeper. Moto Guzzi obviously being the supplier of engines for specific Magni models. Most were the Le Mans 1000 engines that were used by Magni at the time. It all came with a bespoke frame that was designed by Magni himself, and of course the now famous parallelogrammo rear suspension, as we see here as well, specifically designed to neutralize much of the shaft drive torque reaction. We can talk about that later in this video. 1987 saw two new variations made by Magni. First, the Classico 1000, which was a naked bike, retro-styled, with chrome mudguards, wire wheels, and the Arturo 1000, which featured a half fairing, but both shared the Le Mans engine, but emphasized both somewhat classic characteristics and aesthetics. Then in 1989, the Sfida came to market. Sfida meaning challenge in Italian. First as a 1000, and it was styled after the 1960s MV Agusta racers, featuring hand-beaten aluminium fuel tank, humped seat and half fairings, of which about 50 units were built. And by the mid-1990s, Magni introduced the Sfida 1100 with a big bore engine, updated chassis, Forcella Italia forks, Koni shocks, Goldline Brembo brakes. Later updates included also fuel injection, this time on a 1100 Biposto engine. 4-valve engine from the Daytona model, raising output to around 102 horsepower. Monoshock suspension, so they were gradually updated and further engineered along the way. And the top tier Sfida 1004V and the Giappone, another model, 52 Special. They were all built for the Japanese market, limited to only 52 units. And they followed as well, combining a rare design with craftsmanship in making these wonderful machines. Racing successes were seen in Australia, and that prompted Magni to make a new racing bike, fully faired for the twin-cylinder class around 1990. And that was later reimagined as a street model, namely the Magni Australia in 1993. And it was powered by Moto Guzzi's Daytona engine with the V4 4-valve per cylinder engine. And it featured, of course, Magni's own frame design with the monoshock parallelogram rear suspension, Brembo brakes, carbon fiber details, and it all kept the weight within 205 kilograms. A very nice, beautiful bike that was made by Magni in the late 1990s. There was also a 98 version with new frame geometry and fuel injection, now going up to 102 horsepower. So by the 2000s, Arturo, he had handed the operations mainly to his two sons, now operating the business. But the company continued to develop new and striking motorcycles, among which the Filo Rosso is the most famous, I think. It is based around the MV Agusta 3-cylinder. And you see in that motorcycle, as well as with all other Magni motorcycles, the aesthetics taken from the 1960s and 70s MV Agusta racing bikes and reimagining that for a brand new motorcycle that you could buy from Magni. All, of course, a family business that was making very, very nice but bespoke motorcycles still to this very day. So Arturo Magni, he passed away in 2015 at the age of 90. His legacy endures his machines, of course, his craftsmanship, also his managerial qualities in managing that MV Agusta racing department, one of the most successful in motorcycle history, obviously with that huge amount of championship titles they won. So he went from a glider expert to Grand Prix legend. His legacy spans over 70 years of Italian motorcycle excellence, from Gilera to MV Agusta and then into his own company, creating beautiful motorcycles, very bespoke and highly special motorcycles based around engines from MV Agusta, Moto Guzzi, but also BMW, Honda, Suzuki, you name it. All in a very small amount of motorcycles they built, but all of them equally beautiful and made in a beautiful aesthetic way, but also with very nice and beautiful engineering, as we often see with these small Italian companies. Okay, and that brings us to this particular project bike that we have here. Now, one model that we have not mentioned yet in the history section of this video is the Experience, and that was devised by Magni in 2011. As a sort of a racing bike going back to the 1970s, especially built for the Bol Classic of that same year, 2011. So they came up with a frame design based on much of the other models that Magni, of course, made for Moto Guzzi engines, but with small touches. It featured this particular frame with this backbone that you see here, this diagonal line, specific for this model, the Experience, built for that Bol d'Or race. Of course, also with that parallelogram rear suspension, and featured a more MV Agusta style set of bodywork, mainly this hand-beaten aluminium fuel tank, that seat unit, and this full fairing. Now, this particular bike was bought by a client of us. He started out with a 850 Le Mans that he raced in the 1980s and 90s, and then that bike got retired with the idea to somehow restore it back to its former glory. That never happened, but when he saw that Magni frame kit, he also bought that with the idea to bring these two together. Also that never materialized back in the day, so it was shelved and gathered a lot of dust over the years, and that is why he approached us to finally get this all sorted and build it into a complete bike. And that is what we see here. This is the first mock build of that bike, which we'll go over in detail, obviously, all around that Experience frame. The Bol d'Or classic frame with the bodywork, of course, also coming from Magni, and that started out with the 850cc Le Mans engine that was fully rebuilt and tuned to include now a 1000cc bore kit. Also a lighter flywheel, it got larger valves, high compression pistons, Carrillo conrods, so a very nice engine built by a Moto Guzzi specialist already, so that is done. But what we have created here is a complete mock build of that bike, so the initial build, and which we'll go over in detail now. So the basic approach we were tasked with in building this motorcycle was to get, first of all, a beautiful, striking Moto Guzzi Magni available for road use, fast road use. It was meant to be used on the track, but only like track days and stuff. It has to be a roadworthy and legal motorcycle to be used on the road. So that was one of the assignments. Also, aesthetically, it has to go back to the 1970s mostly, 70s, 80s. So that meant that all the parts have to be period correct, so to speak. So that's why we, for instance, went for this Siriani front fork, but also the Borani wire wheels, not going for cast wheels, because these are, in our opinion, going back to a design of the 1970s that is more striking than cast wheels. But that also meant using that beautiful frame that was devised by Magni. And of course that, like I said, it features this backbone structure right here. But we went for the twin shock arrangement, not the monoshock, because that also going back to the 1970s would make it more period correct. That frame, of course, being paired with this wonderful rebuilt Moto Guzzi engine. But also we went for a design where all the components, including the battery, are tucked away under the seat and the fuel tank. Cannot be seen, which means that we can leave this space here open, so it has a more of an airy design to it. So that's also what we have achieved here, all the components being tucked away and not visible to the naked eye, up to when you remove the tank and the seat, obviously. Dual exhausts, La Franconi style, taken directly from the 850 Le Mans, of course. Beautiful exhaust mufflers by La Franconi. The Siriani front fork we talked about, but also a very nice set of Brembo 4-caliper pistons on both sides in the front, and in this instance also quick release. So a very nice design from Brembo, and of course this was the pinnacle of brake technology back in the 1980s, to have this quick release coming directly from the endurance racing, quick release calipers on both sides in the front. So here in the rear, like in the front, we have a fully floating disc with a fixed caliper on a specially developed mounting plate, with the reaction force being put through this shaft here. Very nice setup, we think, and very nice for this special motorcycle. So for the instrument, we have chosen for this Moto Gadget's very classic look, but is a very modern unit, in fact. It includes a rev counter, which is analog, but then there is a digital face for the speedometer, as well as the warning lights, etc. It's all in that instrument there, leaving it very airy and, again, more race-oriented in terms of styling. So that leaves this bike now done for the first initial phase, which means building it up with all the components on the bike, so that we're very happy with. But of course there's a lot of work to be done still, and that means obviously the paint job and a lot of other surface treatment that needs to be done, as well as the frame. It needs to be cleaned up a little bit here and there. There are some brackets still fitted that can be removed. Other brackets have just been tack welded, so we need to make sure that that is all done correctly. Then it is off to the paint shop for final finishing. So that leaves us with the biggest question mark still in this phase of the project, because we are still going to decide on the color and color scheme of this bike. Red is the obvious choice here, but maybe too obvious, and of course we can go any way we like. make it purple, pink, brown. We can go every way, and because it is not going back to anything original, this is a special bike, and that means that we have the freedom to go whenever we like. So let us know in the comment section what you think should be a nice color scheme for this bike. We have some ideas of our own, which we're not going to give away just yet, but perhaps you have some better ideas still. So I'm very keen to see what you guys have to say about that. This bike is now going to be taken apart completely in order for us to get things sorted to the paint shop, other surface treatment as well, and when that comes back we can go into the final build, of which we will make a new video in the near future. So we very much like to learn what you think of this project, what you think of this bike as it is right now, and what it can become. We are very keen to hear your thoughts on that. So be sure to subscribe as well to this channel. Make sure that you get notified whenever we have a new video out there. And for now, we thank you very much for watching. Toodaloo-dokie. See you next time.